All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to uncover a cosmic mystery that has literally been hiding in plain sight. Every time humanity looks up at the night sky, we dream of reaching out to the stars, right? I mean, we've got probes roving around on Mars, we've walked on the moon, and we're looking even further out into the solar system. But there is one planet, our closest neighbor actually, that space agencies are absolutely terrified of. So today, we're going to figure out exactly why that is.
When we compare the two planets, it perfectly illustrates this massive paradox. Venus is basically Earth's twin sister. It has 95% of Earth's volume, which means they are almost exactly the same size and weight. And sitting at just 27 million kilometers away, it's the closest planet to us in the entire solar system. In theory, it is the absolute perfect candidate for exploration.
So we really have to ask ourselves, with brilliant visionaries like Elon Musk laser-focused on building human settlements on Mars, which, by the way, is way further away, why has nobody attempted to build a settlement on Venus? Why don't space agencies even want to send a basic run-of-the-mill robotic probe there anymore? What exactly is everyone so afraid of? Section 1. The race to Venus. Well, to understand this, we need to go back a bit. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in this fierce, high-stakes space race, and the Soviets set their sights firmly on Venus. But there was a major problem. Nobody actually knew what was under its really thick clouds. Early telescopes just couldn't pierce through them. But in 1960, the American astronomer Carl Sagan published a research paper theorizing this brilliant antagonist for our story. He warned that those clouds were actually trapping heat in a runaway greenhouse effect, making the surface completely unsurvivable. Section 2. Crushed by the atmosphere. Now, the Soviet Union essentially ignored Sagan's warnings. They saw Venus as this ultimate challenge to establish absolute dominance in space. But what followed was this escalating nightmare of rapid-fire failures. Let's look at the timeline. In 1961, Venera 1's sensors were completely fried by the sun before it even got there. In 1965, Venera 2's thermal coating melted, Venera 3 crashed outright, and Venera 4, get this, it was built to withstand 25 times Earth's atmospheric pressure, but it simply imploded. It literally crumbled like a tin can when the pressure hit 22 atmospheres, and that was while it was still 26 kilometers up in the sky. By combining the data from these early, doomed Soviet probes with data from NASA's Mariner flybys, scientists made a horrifying discovery. Carl Sagan was completely right. The surface temperature of Venus is an agonizing 480 degrees Celsius. To put that into a relatable perspective, that is hot enough to melt solid lead. But surprisingly, the heat isn't even the worst part. The atmospheric pressure at the surface is around 90 atmospheres. So what does that mean? Well, standing on the surface of Venus is equivalent to the crushing weight you'd feel if you were a full kilometer deep beneath Earth's oceans. It's an environment that actively wants to crush absolutely anything that enters it. And if the heat and the crushing pressure didn't take you out, there's a violently toxic atmosphere waiting for you. The air is almost entirely carbon dioxide and nitrogen, with less than 1% oxygen. Oh, and you know those thick, mysterious clouds blocking our view of the surface? Yeah, they're made of highly corrosive, highly toxic sulfuric acid. Venus wasn't just hostile, it was a literal, real-life hellscape. Section 3. Submarines in space. Faced with these apocalyptic conditions, the Soviets realized standard space tech was entirely useless. They needed a radical pivot. Instead of the delicate, lightweight aluminum frames we usually send into the cosmos, they basically had to launch deep-sea submarine technology into space. Venera 7 was this 490-kilogram, egg-shaped capsule forged out of solid titanium. It was engineered to withstand a staggering 180 atmospheres of pressure and over 500 degrees of heat just to survive the trip down. But a thick shell wasn't going to be enough to beat that 480-degree heat. So they came up with these incredible workarounds. First, they used a lithium nitrate refrigeration system to pre-cool the internal instruments down to -8 degrees Celsius before it even entered the atmosphere. Then, they intentionally used extremely tiny parachutes. Why? Because they actually needed the probe to fall as fast as possible through the atmosphere to minimize its exposure to the intense heat before hitting the ground. The descent was incredibly violent. At 10 kilometers up, the parachute actually tore, and Venera 7 crashed into the ground at 60 kilometers per hour, ending up completely tilted on its side. But, incredibly, it survived. For 23 miraculous minutes, a weak signal beamed back to Earth.
Venera 7 made history as the very first human-made object to transmit data from the surface of another planet, proving once and for all that Venus had a solid rock surface.
Section 4. Sights and Sounds of Hell.
So surviving just to send back a few data points was great, but it wasn't enough. The Soviets wanted pictures, and this pushed 1970s technology to absolute unimaginable limits. Take the descent of Venera 9 in 1975, for instance. Just imagine trying to land a camera while falling through a 12-kilometer thick layer of pure acid clouds, battling winds over 360 kilometers per hour. That is vastly more destructive than the worst tornadoes on Earth. Near the bottom, the air was actually so dense that the probe didn't even need a parachute. It literally just floated down through the thick, soupy atmosphere.
Against all odds, the lander hit the ground. Its shock absorbers were instantly crushed flat. But then, a protective lens cap popped off, and humanity saw the rocky, desolate, alien landscape of Venus for the very first time. I mean, remember, this is 1975. The camera was only 64 kilopixels. Your modern smartphone is thousands of times more powerful. But capturing this black and white image from a 480-degree inferno millions of miles away, that is still one of humanity's absolute greatest achievements.
And they didn't stop there. The Soviets kept iterating. By 1981, they sent Venera 13, which was totally packed with upgrades. They added air brakes to slow the descent gently, they included a color camera, a mechanical drilling machine to collect soil samples, and, this is crazy, a microphone to capture the actual audio of the Venusian environment. And against all logic, Venera 13 survived for over 2 full hours in those hellish conditions.
Thanks to that microphone, humanity finally heard the true voice of Venus, and it was terrifying. The audio recordings captured a deafening, intense roar of the Venusian winds. Scientists described that heavy, dense atmospheric wind as sounding like absolute apocalyptic destruction. It sounded as if the very rocks around the probe were breaking and crumbling apart under the extreme pressure.
The images sent back were so utterly alien that they even sparked a wild controversy. A Soviet scientist named Leonid Xanfomolody looked at the photos and famously claimed he saw a scorpion-like creature moving on the surface. But actually, scratch that. When scientists looked closer, the truth was much more grounded, though equally terrifying. The quote-unquote scorpion was actually just the probe's own camera lens cap, which had been completely warped, deformed, and melted by the 480-degree inferno.
So, what does this all mean? Well, the Venera missions proved without a shadow of a doubt that Venus is a graveyard for spacecraft. It's simply far too extreme for human settlement or even prolonged robotic exploration. So the next time you admire that bright, beautiful, serene star in the evening sky, ask yourself, can you picture the crushing, toxic, and terrifying inferno raging just beneath those clouds? Because right next door to Earth, hell is very, very real.